A whole new global talk show, Newstellers. Hi guys, welcome back to the studio.
Hi, hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So I'm sure you've all had a very busy week. When you're not bringing us the breaking news and meeting those tight deadlines, what do you do in your spare time?
I like to go hiking. There's a lot of great trails around here in Seoul.
Seoul's perfect for that.
Perfect ajushi activity.
You just wait a few years, Stephen.
I'm getting there.
How about yourself?
Well, I like to read, of course, it's part of the job as a journalist, but I also like doing things that just kind of take my mind off of the news, so maybe just watching movies or going out to eat, meeting friends,
All right. How about you guys?
On weekends, I'm trying to get out of Seoul, go to Korean countryside.
Right.
Really enjoy it.
How about you, Atta?
Well, I love to play sports, and
Okay.
with the Spanish, I love to play football. So that's one of my hobbies in the weekend, and also going with friends for some food, some drinks, just as usual.
Okay. The world went into shock last month with the Germanwings plane crash. I'm sure you guys all know about it.
Yeah, it's a tragedy, really.
It really
was
is.
a tragedy, and especially in my country, in Spain, because 50 Spanish people died there.
Right.
And it was a tragedy, still on the news, all the data that is rising up these days.
It's been a bad year or so for aviation in general.
It has.
I read a while ago that 2014 was the year that had the highest recorded aviation fatalities on
Really?
record, which is pretty amazing when you think of all the strides that have been made to make air travel safer and more reliable.
I mean, even if you have all those standards and controls, one evil or not so healthy mind can just dash all that to the ground, literally.
Every year there are more flights and more flights.
There are.
The odds just
So,
get
I mean,
higher,
if it's only for probability, there should be
That's a good point.
So I think one of the main points that came out of this tragedy, or that the news focused on, was could this have been prevented if Germanwings had had access to pilots' medical records? Privacy being a big issue. I mean, in Germany, I believe their privacy laws are pretty strict compared to some other countries. So that's what we're going to discuss today. Privacy, should it be protected or controlled? So let's talk to our German journalist now. We've got Mr. Soren Kittel on the line. Hello, Soren.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Good morning.
Guten Morgen.
Hey, hello, Soren.
Hey, Soren, how are you?
I'm fine.
So we were just talking about the Germanwings tragedy that happened just last month. I believe that there's a bit of a controversy around the privacy laws in Germany right now. What's the background on that? How did that come about?
There are three issues here at stake. One is the personal privacy of Andreas L, because many media outlets still don't use his last name.
Right.
Then there's also the debate about his medical record and if that should be changed in general. And of course also the privacy of the family members and the friends, because that has been invaded as well.
What does the public opinion think in Germany? Like, are they now in favor of allowing employers to have access to the medical records of employees?
Well, there was a debate, but from what I read, and there was an article in the last Sunday's Spiegel, and they agreed that they won't change the rule on that.
Okay, very
There's really
interesting.
a case to be made. Like when you have someone who's in control of so many lives, like important information like mental stability, depression. I mean, I think these are really relevant issues that an employer should know. There's no reason why someone like that should be behind, should be in the cockpit of an airplane.
I completely agree
I
with that.
disagree with that totally.
Oh, really?
I mean, it's not because of one case, a very particular case, that you should change the law. Like, privacy is very important, and there must be other ways to...
I agree. I think that
but the lives of other people is more important. There are certain jobs that they have to do those kind of regulations, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
there's a
think you
case-by-case
can
thing.
put privacy
like,
over that security or safety.
I mean, you
issue.
can find a solution with a regulating agency that would be able to control the state of each pilot, but the fact that the employers have access to medical records, I find that pretty disturbing, and I don't think one case should justify a complete change of the law.
I agree more with Fred. I think in the emotional aftermath of this kind of terrible disaster, it's often tempting to say, well, what could have prevented this? And try to change regulations and try to change the way we think about these to eliminate all risk. But the reality is that when you're talking about something like aviation, which is an inherently risky thing, there's no rule that you can make that's going to eliminate all risk.
It's
Well,
interesting. Soren, yes,
Soren, do you
let's
wanna
get back
take
to
it?
you.
Yeah, what's your point? What's your idea?
The problem here was, and that's what the state prosecutor said from Düsseldorf, the one who went to all the doctors and asked for the medical records. He said that he acted because of the pressure of the world press. And that was like to other courts, this was like, you cannot just act as a state prosecutor because the world press is looking at you so much. I think you ultimately have to obey the law, and the law basically says that you cannot do that. But from a human perspective, especially in this case, because there has been such a demand from all over the world to know what really happened, it's kind of justifiable, but not by the law. That's the problem.
All right, thank you, Soren, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Soren.
Thank you. Bye, Soren.
Thank you.
So as we were talking about with Soren, in the case of Germany, like in the Germanwings case, the private lives of people are pretty well protected. But that's not the case in all countries. You guys have been in Korea a little while now. Have you ever felt like you've had to expose too much of yourself, too much information?
Well, in my case, a friend of mine, I was helping her to do her CV and apply to one of those Korean big companies.
Right.
And she has to say that private information, like her father's job, her mother's job, her blood type, and even her religion.
I think the problem that sometimes comes up in Korea is when personal things become criteria for things like employment. I mean, I think there are cases where women who are perhaps in their late 20s or in their 30s, they're kind of at what is considered marriageable age. If they're applying for a job, whether or not they're married or whether or not they have children can factor into the company's decision in whether or not they hire them, because if they're not married or if they are married but they haven't yet had a child, the company might think, well, they don't want to hire her because if they do, she will have a baby shortly and then they'll have to pay for her while she's on maternity leave.
Sometimes for job interviews, they ask the quantity of alcohol you can drink. Chuliang.
So I think when that culture spills over to the workplace and when it affects your well-being.
I can find, on job, I've hired interns in the past, and a lot of them include their picture on their CV. And in America, that's not required. I mean, that seems to be an invasion of privacy too. Now, I know Fred in France.
In France, you have to put the picture on your resume.
I mean, it's not mandatory, but if you don't send your picture, it's like you don't send your image, and probably your CV would not be that well considered.
All right, so in Korea, perhaps there's a little bit too much invasion of privacy compared to perhaps too little in some Western countries. Okay, what about CCTV, closed circuit television? Do you feel like there's an invasion in Korea? Do you think it's too much?
It's not only in Korea, right? I think it's everywhere in the world. After the 9/11 terrorist attack, the number of CCTV in the world doubled. And
Sujung from the UK, I mean, that's a big issue in England.
It is. I think I'm so used to CCTVs everywhere that I don't really acknowledge them at all now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you're a normal citizen and you are in a public space doing your normal life, you don't have even to care about the CCTVs. And I think they are good to solve some problems afterwards when some crimes happen. But then in my case, I know there are a lot of CCTVs around, but they don't really even pay attention to them, and I don't care.
I guess the concern is that, right, I mean, if you are a normal law-abiding citizen, yeah, you have nothing to worry about. But, it's going to depend on how that video could be used. Like, say if you're making out with your girlfriend in a park, you don't want someone to have that, and it could be used against you.
Of course,
that's the main concern.
I think the bad point of the CCTV thing is the misuse of CCTV thing. It's like the bad point of cars is the misuse of a car that you can kill someone.
Sure.
Right? So if you just have the CCTVs for doing good things, it's good.
And one of the good aspects I can see of CCTV, I like this case in Korea, the recent case of child abuse by a kindergarten teacher.
Yes, yes.
The fact that there is a very clear video of this violence helps to catch perpetrator and hopefully prevent this kind of
I mean, just look at the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013 and the trial that just wrapped up in Massachusetts. The initial evidence and the manhunt that found Dzhokhar Tsarnaev and his brother Tamerlan came from CCTV footage that was nearby where they dropped off the explosives. So it definitely is very useful for preventing or catching criminals.
Of course, and now in Europe, for example, we have the threat of the Islamic State, and we have a lot of small groups of terrorists. And I know that the Spanish police and the Spanish authorities are doing a big use of these CCTV cameras to catch possible terrorists or to monitorize some activities of some suspicious people that can threaten the security of all the country.
I think the question that we need to ask, though, is in monitoring everybody and looking for these few, this very small number of terrorists, are we compromising things that are important? And I think if we look at many years of human history, we can see that if you give governments power over people's private lives, they are very likely to abuse it. So I agree with my colleagues' points about how CCTV can be useful in looking up on crimes, but when we talk about this, I think we also need to show the other side of the things that we might be sacrificing in having this widespread monitoring going on.
And it's not just CCTV anymore. You get black boxes, hidden cameras, webcams everywhere. Do you think it's getting a bit too much? I mean,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think privacy is probably one of the biggest issue in our history now.
I think we have to get used to it. It's the new world, and it's going to be more and more. It's not gonna go back. And we have to make that difference between the public space and the private space. And we have to know that in the 21st century, the public space is totally public. And everyone can record you with his mobile phone, because it's impossible.
It's a form of check and balance.
Because if not,
I think Fred has a good question.
Why we should accept
Why should we accept
because how can we ban a private person to record you on his mobile phone? We should be like chasing everyone who is recording other person.
Fred, I mean, think back just a few weeks ago.
It's okay. It's public space.
Fred, a few weeks ago in South Carolina in the U.S., there was this incident where a cop shot to death a man who he said had stolen his taser. If it wasn't for someone holding up his smartphone camera, which revealed that the cop shot the man as he was running and then placed his taser next to the man to at least imply that it had been stolen, this cop would have never been brought to justice. Now he's facing murder charges. So in that sense, it's a good thing that people have cameras. And now this is only enhancing the debate in the US that cops should be wearing body cameras. And I think it's a great check and balance. It'll prevent police from overstepping their authority, and it will also keep people in check, hopefully from breaking the law.
And I agree, this is a very good example, but we are now living in a society where you say there is no private space at all. Everybody will become a suspect, and I find it very, very worrisome, really.
Because where does it end?
I don't think everybody can become a suspect, and you have your privacy, of course, in your house.
We don't have privacy
Nobody's going to
anymore.
put that CCTV in your room. So
Some people do.
No, you have your phone, like they can track you with your phone.
Maybe your wife can track you in your room with your phone, but if you're
There has to be check. There has to be regulations. There has to
the money we spend on surveying, on the surveillance, on everybody, we could spend it on crime prevention. Like maybe we should start to think of like before people commit crime, maybe there is more social work, more.
A couple years back, I did a report here in Seoul about a school that teaches ordinary citizens to be spies, to hide cameras and record their neighbors who are breaking the law. And that is absolutely too much. And I think the problem with that is, these are private schools teaching these people. They can teach whatever they want, but policy here allows that to happen. Cops will pay people for bringing in these, hidden videos to rat out the neighbors, and that's bad. When you're turning neighbors against neighbors, when you're making snoops out of your neighbor, that's not good.
I feel like we're losing a little bit of the magic of life, though. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, when I was first exploring, when I first got freedom to go out without my parents, just be out with my friends, riding our bikes, and just feeling like nobody is watching me. I'm free to do whatever I want. I can explore, I can discover, and kids who are living nowadays, they're never going to have that experience.
And
I have no way of none of us have any way of knowing how that might affect them.
But I think that happens in every generation. And probably 20 years ago, your parents would say the same because you were playing video games instead of being.
They were probably right, though.
because the world changes, and I think.
But I don't think the world is necessarily changing in a good way, and maybe we should resist the way.
And
it is.
we lost the right to make mistakes. That's the problem. If you make a mistake when you're 16, this will follow you all your life until you're dead, and that's extremely bad. I mean, this should not.
I'm glad there are no videos on YouTube of me when I was 16.
Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes when I was 15. I'm happy nobody recorded them.
So do you think CCTV changes your behavior?
Yeah, it
Yes,
does.
whether we realize it or not.
If you know you're being recorded, you will act differently.
Okay. All right, so let's get a little bit deeper into that. I mean, there's always this debate between public interest how far do the governments need to protect us versus our privacy?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, in the history of humanity, no government agency such as the American NSA, the National Security Agency, had so much power, a massive surveillance power.
The technology is better. I mean, it's just, I mean, of course, they have the ability more so than ever before because they have the technology. I'm not justifying it, but of course, you know.
But they're keeping all our phone records, and especially foreign citizens. As an American citizen, they're not supposed to keep it for such a long time. But
every time I talk with my mom on Skype, I kind of think, you know, could someone be listening? It's definitely, I think, in the post 9/11 world, the justification of protecting American citizens from terrorists has, I think some could say, has been misused and abused.
It's a hollow justification because if you look at most of what the NSA and other agencies are collecting, people's phone records, metadata of that sort, nobody can say with a straight face that they're collecting this information because they want to protect people from terrorism. They're collecting this on everybody, not just people who are suspected of being involved in terrorism.
They spy on UNICEF, the children's fund, they spy on lawyers, they spy on the German head of state. I mean, they really have this amazing capacity and there is no oversight.
Spying has been happening in all the history, and maybe now they have more sophisticated techniques, but as a normal citizens, I don't think we should be paranoid. I know it's a problem, but I don't think, I'm not paranoid at all. I don't think that the NSA is listening to my conversation. If they do,
but what is a normal citizen? What is a normal citizen? What if you do something? First, what if you do something they consider a suspect? And imagine we are not living in a democracy, but in an authoritarian state.
I think that's the concern, right? It's not necessarily how the data is being collected now. It's how a future government might use that data. So I think that's the fear, that this metadata that's being collected might not have any direct impact on citizens now.
So there's a big risk that you know, the personal information being collected and even surveillance and CCTV cameras and footage is causing some unintended harm in some cases as well. So we're going to have a look at a couple of clips right now. The first one is where a soft drinks company used CCTV footage of the daily lives of citizens for their advert. And the purpose of the ad was to show life-affirming moments throughout the world. But I believe that they didn't receive the consent of the people exposed, and it just goes to show how captured we are all the time.
It's completely
amazing,
unethical.
isn't it?
I mean, they're making money off of this product and using the free services of unwilling participants to help them in their ad campaign. That's completely unethical.
Indeed. And the next one, you can see that the Abu Dhabi police revealed CCTV clips of the Reem Island ghost who murdered an American teacher. But the problem was that the video captured not only the criminal, but also the innocent people who were also present at the shopping mall, as you can see. And this kind of unwanted exposure, of course, is a huge violation to our privacy. So as you can see, news agencies often use CCTV footage during their reports and black box footage as well. Do you guys think this is reasonable? Have you guys ever used it yourselves?
I think the right for information is very important, but also you have to respect the privacy of the people. So I think it's ethical to show those images about people around, whatever, in the street, in public places, as long as what you show doesn't harm their image, their integrity.
But who gets to decide what constitutes harm in that? Like, that's a very
think
subjective.
That's your responsibility as a journalist.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I mean,
it's logical.
I do a lot of video journalism as well, and when my colleague and I, my colleague who serves as my cameraman, we make sure when we're taking street shots, we do not get people's faces. We don't try to show any information that would reveal the identity of a person, you know, walking down the street or what have you. So we do take caution to protect people's privacy in that sense.
I do radio, so for me it's a bit easier. But, I think it's not only CCTV, but yeah, as a journalist you have to be responsible.
And one aspect that we haven't touched on is if, say, that there was a murder that had been captured on CCTV, the families of the victims, if they keep just seeing that footage over and over, it must really, really affect them.
The media shouldn't abuse that type of footage.
Exactly.
Yeah, we should have some strict laws.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You need very strict oversight, and the government, and you need regulatory agencies to control.
And you need good journalists who will make good decisions.
Sure.
Of course, there's always going to be the incentive for like less scrupulous editors to take advantage of graphic footage to get more views. But
I mean,
But
look,
if the law prevents them from doing that, then that would not happen.
maybe getting into censorship a little bit.
look, I mean, look at the
Yeah, it looks like
tabloids.
that.
And look at the tabloids in the UK. Like, what was it? The Rupert Murdoch paper, the World Today, the
World News.
The World News.
something?
Anyhow, they were wiretapping sources and using that. It's completely unethical journalism. Not that London tabloids should be held up to a high degree of journalistic integrity, but right, completely.
Yeah, I mean,
out
there
of-
was public
yeah.
outrage at that.
Sure.
I think her name was Millie Dowler. I think she was 13 when she was abducted, and they'd been tapping into her voicemail messages. So her family thought these messages have been listened to, perhaps she's still alive. So that was what sparked
Sure.
the outrage in the UK.
Yeah, that's too much.
Yeah, the
Way
journal-
too much.
When journalism affects the outcome of an investigation like that, when it changes the story in itself, then the journalist has gone too far often.
Okay. So I think you guys have highlighted the use of, just standards. And I think related to that is regulations on the use of personal and private information. We've also seen movements urging for the structural protection of the right to privacy and personal data in the flood of information. So Atta, I heard there was a special ruling related in Spain
Yeah,
last
it was
year.
last year. It was not only Spain, it was extended to Europe because it was the European Court of Justice. They ruled for first time to protect the right to be forgotten in search in Google. And it was very important. It was raised by a Spanish citizen that because there was some news that Google still showed up when someone's searching for his name because he had unpaid mortgage before, like a long time ago. But he paid it already, but still his name was related to that in Google. So that guy did a really long way until he got to the European Court of Justice.
Wow.
And finally, the European Court of Justice did that kind of general law that it will be a precedent for the future. And I think it's really good. It's really good for
Well, you
the
can see how
people.
privacy is really entering even popular culture now. I mean, look at the Oscars this year. Citizen4, the documentary on Edward Snowden, the NSA whistleblower, won Best Documentary. So, I mean, I think there's a real keen awareness now, and perhaps thanks to the Edward Snowden leaks, that privacy is much more, at the forefront now in people's consciousness.
Indeed. All right, so it's been a really, really fascinating debate today about the privacy issues that we come across in our lives. So just like last week, I'd love to hear your one-line summaries on the talk. Fred?
There is no privacy anymore. Be careful.
Okay.
Mine is totally opposite. If you see a CCTV, don't worry and smile.
Oh, nice. I like that. I like that. Jason?
Kind of bland, but privacy cannot be taken for granted.
It's very, very true. And Stephen?
Say, Big Brother is watching, so resist while you can.
Pretty scary stuff. All right, that's all the time we have for today, but join us next week for a whole new global talk show, Newstellers. Good job, good job. It really was. A lot of heated debate. I love it. We will be open for any opinions or requests on our official website as well as our Facebook page. We have a look at this picture.
The one on top looks like my friends and I used to make forts when we
Right,
had
right.
sleepovers. We would pile up blankets.
And then the second image is
If you do that in the train, everybody surrounding you would think that you are seeing some dirty video.
they have like a plunger thing that you attach to the back of your head.
Just sitting next to me and he kept like me falling over. I was trying to read. I was really worried he was gonna fall on top of me.